So you heard me interview Ezra Levant about what's going on in Canada. He says, hey, there's billions and billions of barrels of oil that the United States should get. It's friendly oil. It's free oil. It's not bad oil like you get from OPEC or from Venezuela. To that end, let's talk to Daniel Turner. He's an energy expert. He's founder and executive director of Power of the Future, powerofthefuture.com. Good to have you back, Daniel. How are you?
Oh, Joe, it's great to be on your program. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. So President Trump says we've got more resources than anybody else. I think he's talking a lot about liquefied natural gas as well. And we might have that if you include Anwar and everybody else, that we don't get the Outer Continental Shelf. We don't go and get all the stuff that we have available because of the ridiculous, green energy stuff that we had from the past administration. In Canada, they've got tons and tons of oil, the good kind of oil that we like to refine down in the Houston and the Gulf area. That's a very good friend of ours. So what is your take on the whole back and forth on tariffs, the whole energy? We're going to stop energy, says the guy from Ontario, if you don't play ball with us. I don't like to have the acrimonious relationship with Canada, but I also don't want them to take advantage of us. What is your perspective on their supply of oil specifically and how we should get that compared to maybe the criminal oil that we're getting from OPEC and others?
Sure. Canada definitely has tremendous oil and gas resources. And quite frankly, a lot like Alaska, we're not even sure how much they have because it's so vast and it's so remote that really good exploratory drilling hasn't even happened. Of course, we want Canada as a close partner. And I think the tariffs can be a useful tool in achieving a more fair trade with Canada as a country. I support President Trump's efforts to say, look, Canada's taken advantage of us for a very long time. You look at some of the tariffs on non-energy products like dairy and agriculture, where we have a 300% tariff. Canada imposes a 300% tariff on American goods. So I would like to see Canada be a better trading partner both ways. Canada's oil, especially as part of our larger energy portfolio, is important. Canada right now, well, at their maximum right before COVID, they were producing close to 6 million barrels a day. It was around 5.5, and they don't consume near that, which means they just have surplus, and that surplus was going to the United States. So I used to liken our relationship with Canada and the oil industry as the Toronto Blue Jays. Yeah, they're in Toronto, but it's all Major League Baseball, and their rules are our rules. And now you find out they're actually not playing by the same rules. And so hopefully this will course correct.
Well, the president says it's a $200 billion deficit that we're in with Canada. They have a surplus on us. I think it's $350 billion when it comes to Mexico. So the USMCA happened under Trump 1.0, and I thought it was a much better deal than NAFTA. Do you know why they're still taking advantage of us, even though we negotiated a new deal?
No, I don't, and that's always been a little bit of a question I have, and I think it's something the administration should explain as well. This was a very important free trade deal that he negotiated back in, I think it was 17 or 18, but President Trump negotiated. Did it fall apart? Did the Biden administration ignore it? Was it not enforced properly?
Right.
So no, I don't know what happened with our relationship with them. I know President Trump talks a lot about how he's using these tariffs for fair trade and also because of fentanyl. And he, maybe his intelligence department is giving him information that's not open to the public of just how lax the Canadian border is and how Canada could do a lot more, but clearly isn't. So I've never seen tariffs as a long-term thing. I think where I get angry in the tariff conversation when you listen to talking heads is they make it sound like that's it, 25% on cars going forward from now on. It's like, this is a negotiation, right? This is the first step. It looks bad, but let's give it a little bit of time because they'll come back to the table. Heck, they announced that they're having negotiations tomorrow. So clearly it's already working.
Well, it's a leverage play, as you know. And by the way, the leverage worked almost immediately. He almost immediately dropped the tariffs on any USMCA covered goods. So there's no tariff there. They're looking at it now. They're re-examining it now by the 2nd of April. And honestly, he said he didn't want to do it on April 1st because people would think it's April Fool's Day. So on April 2nd, they're going to release the actual findings of this investigation and then decide should we or should we not tariff. I think Canada has the better part of a month right now to straighten up a little bit and figure it out. Let me, though, ask you, and again, it's Daniel Turner, go to powerofthefuture.com. Let me ask you about the Keystone XL pipeline. Biden comes in, cancels that, lays off 11,000 workers who were in disarray over it. I believe, this is my thought, my opinion, he does it because China actually benefits from us not having that pipeline getting Canadian crude down to the Gulf Coast. China and also the train industry also benefits from it. What were the big takeaways for you when Biden canceled the Keystone XL pipeline? Was it worse than we even thought?
It really was. And I appreciate you asking that because, yes, it was the pipeline itself, which was devastating, and the thousands of men and women who lost their job. And Power of the Future, promoted a lot of them. We were there the day it happened, the day after it happened. And we put them on our platforms. We put them on TV programs, et cetera, to tell their story. But in the long term, it did some real damage to the economy. And what it did is it told any large infrastructure project under construction that you got to be sure to finish this before a presidential cycle, because now a project like this is up for grabs in a political debate. And this is where President Biden really did something unprecedented. And I hate using that word because it's so overused. A lot of things are precedented, but this really was a first time, because this was not that I've heard it be compared to Doge. This is not canceling government contracts. This is not clawing back government grant money. This is the private sector that just needed the government's permission. When President Biden reversed that, he put the full faith and credit of the United States into question mark. And so now think of any other major pipeline project or infrastructure project, something that's going to take 6-7 years. Can't you already see Gavin Newsom running for president in 2028 saying, and when I'm elected president, I will shut down that, and everyone starts to clap.
Yeah.
Well, now who wants to build anything that the next president could potentially cancel if it helps get that guy elected? So that's
well, let me ask you this, because I don't know how the process goes. Was the pipeline only okayed through executive order, or because how did Biden undo it? I thought it was okay. It was part of a law that said, yes, this is going to happen. Did he just decide not to throw the funds at it? Do you know how he canceled it? Was it just through executive action?
It is, and the reason why, and this goes back 100 some odd years. It's an odd little quirk in our history that Congress could actually rectify, and hopefully that's something we're trying to work with legislators to fix going forward. But it literally goes back to when the first transatlantic telegraph cables arrived in America, and I think it was New York City. It may have been Boston, but literally the boats are there, right, with the thousands of miles of cable.
Yeah.
And they got to the water's edge and they said, are we allowed, right? Like, what do we do? And Congress didn't know what to do, so they asked the president. The president at the time said, well, this is like an international thing. We'll give it to the State Department. So when you go back in Keystone and they say the Obama State Department okayed it, well, the reason why is because any type of pipeline or cable that crosses an international border has been relegated to the State Department, only because no one else knew what to do with it. Now, Congress can claw that power back, and I think they should.
Well, I think so as well, because if it's actually in law, in statute, then it's much harder to change than if somebody just says, okay, State Department, do your thing. That's a huge difference. I did not know. Daniel, thanks for the knowledge. It is powerofthefuture.com, powerofthefuture.com. So the tariffs, as I said, it's a leverage play. Close the border, stop fentanyl coming in. Stop taking advantage of us to the tune of $500 billion between Mexico and Canada. And again, I just had a news guy from Canada on where he's going, yeah, we really want to make a deal, but guess what? The Liberals are in control. They'd rather not make a deal until they win the election in October or whatever it's going to be. So they're not really even poised to make a deal with the United States. So what should the president do? What should this administration do? I don't think you want a prolonged tariff war because that gives liberals power in Canada. We'd much rather have conservatives there.
Absolutely. And you know, the Liberal Party in Canada is in bad shape for a lot of the same reasons the Biden administration was in bad shape. They have a lot of open borders. They're racking up a tremendous amount of debt. They have increased violence in their cities. So there's an overall question of what is happening in Canada. How do we make Canada great again? This trade war could, you know, it makes people rally around the leader at the time. And right now the Liberals are in charge in Canada, and that's bad for the Canadian country. What they decide to do, I think, is on them. For me, what's important about the tariff conversation is it has highlighted some flaws and some vulnerabilities in our overall economy, and particularly in energy. So you look at the Premier of Ontario, who threatened and has already reneged, but he threatened a 25% tariff on electricity to Michigan, Wisconsin, and New York. And then he threatened to just turn it off completely and said, I'm going to plunge your states into darkness. Well, we can have that conversation of the tariffs, but I want to know, why are we buying so much damn electricity from Canada?
I had no idea. I mean, did you know this going in, that we're buying all that electricity from Canada for three major states?
No, I knew Vermont was buying a lot because Bernie Sanders always brags about how Vermont doesn't use a lot of fossil fuels, but the secret is because they buy it from Montreal.
It's so backward.
And that doesn't surprise me that some of these blue state governors would do that. You know, if you say, I'm going to close 4 coal plants and the electric grid is absolutely fine, we have more electricity than ever. Well, if your Canadian purchases are off book, they don't count as emissions, they don't count as energy losses. So it looks like you're going green, but you're not. You're just outsourcing your problems to Canada, and you've given your state tremendous vulnerability. I love Canada. I have no problem with the Canadian people, but Canada's not America. And if Michigan is buying electricity from Canada, that is a vulnerability that is now being exploited.
It is Daniel Turner. Go to powerofthefuture.com, powerofthefuture.com. If you had the president's ear, and you know that between now and the midterms, very, very vital, you've got to have a booming economy. Energy prices have to be low. Egg prices have to be low. Everything's got to go down. It's got to feel like happy days are here again, or else he really stands a chance of losing the House and/or Senate in the midterms. So if you had his ear between now and the midterms, what does he need to do when it comes to energy to make us energy powerful again, energy independent again? What would you have him do? Start pressing buttons to do these things today. What?
Talk to the American people as frequently as possible and explain to them what is happening. The American people aren't dumb, and I think a lot of our elected leaders in D.C., particularly the Democrats, treat them as dumb, and they coddle them, and they lie to them, and they try to pull the wool over their eyes. The American people, even if they weren't necessarily fans of President Trump, a lot of people voted for him for the first time last November because things were so bad. So they're going to give the guy a shot. The best thing he can do is explain to them what is happening and how it's going to take some time. So, for example, I saw Energy Secretary Chris Wright just yesterday signed the 4th LNG export treaty. That needs a lot more publicity. The American people need to know that we're selling these products again. The president likes to build things. He's a builder by nature. I think building pipelines, he talked about the pipeline from Pennsylvania through New England across New York. Right. You know, you go to those places and tell them they're not liberals. They may be in a blue state, but they're not liberals, and they want cheap electricity and cheap energy. And you go there and you tell them, we're going to build this pipeline and your costs are going to come down. They'll get on your side. So President Trump is a brilliant communicator. I'm sure he's exhausted. Most of us are. But this is where now you start losing your constituents because they don't see the changes happen. It's only been 2 months. They're getting bombarded by the liberal press that, oh, this stinks, everything is bad. You know, even egg prices are down $1.85.
Right.
No one's talking about
Nobody is talking about that. That's such a great point. I think you're right. I think that ceding the narrative to the legacy liberal media is a bad thing to do. That's why I enjoy having you on. Can you explain to my audience and me, Daniel, exactly what Biden did when it came to the LNG exports? We had a deal with the EU, and then suddenly they just stopped doing it. They closed down some ports or something. And then when Biden was asked about that by Speaker Johnson, Biden said, I didn't do that. And Johnson said, I'll show you the order that you signed that stopped these exports from happening. Can you explain in simple terms, what did Biden do, or somebody who made him sign something, what did they do to stop our deal with the LNG exports to the EU, or slow them down at least?
And this is one of those areas where there is legislation to rectify this so it doesn't happen again in the future. But as of now, the president has certain prerogatives. And under the guise of climate change, under the guise of we need to investigate these emissions and carbon footprint and contributing to the global climate crisis, in January of last year, he ordered a pause on LNG exports and said, until this study is finished, we need to pause our exports. Well, the pause lasted all through the election.
Wow.
And then after, obviously, Trump won, the Biden administration announced that we've got all these studies finally done, and yeah, we're probably going to have to keep these exports from happening because it's bad for the climate. Well, President Trump quickly
Unbelievable.
reversed them. But how does the president have that authority, right? What if you had some crazy liberal peacemonger president who said, I'm going to shut down all military production? Right, because I think it's bad for the world. I'm going to shut down. So the president, I don't want a weak president, but I also don't want an omnipotent president. And President Biden, if it was, you better wear this mask or you can't leave your house. Remember I'm growing impatient with the unvaccinated.
Yeah.
I'm shutting down this industry because I think we need to study it. That's not the way the presidency should be ever used.
Well, let me ask you this, because you just made a great point. So he shuts it down for a year. And again, the man, Joe Biden, didn't know he did that. He claimed that he just said okay to a study. He didn't know the study went along with shutting down production or shutting down the exports. So when you shut down the terminals, Europe still needs LNG. So do they turn to Russia? Did we just actually cede money-making opportunities for Russia because we wanted to do a stupid study that was really about green energy?
And that's the remarkable thing of how energy is so intertwined in everything, including national security and geopolitics. And even President Trump put that on his Truth Social platform. The European Union spent more buying fossil fuels from Russia than they gave to Ukraine in aid against the war of Russia. So how is the Biden administration not somehow culpable in this, right? If you really wanted to end the war in Ukraine, then bankrupting Russia is the quickest, and it's also probably the most peaceful. It's what President Reagan did to bankrupt the USSR, right? We wouldn't fire a shot if Russia was out of money. But Russia has so much money to conscript their military because we're forcing the world to buy their fossil fuels. So you can say, well, we should be using wind and solar, but we're not. We're using fossil fuels, and you're buying them from Russia, and you made them richer and more powerful.
It's Daniel Turner, powerofthefuture.com. Go there, powerofthefuture.com. Less than a minute, maybe like 30 or 45 seconds. Again, if you have President Trump's ear, do you tell him start making more nuclear energy available? Do you tell him open up the clean coal plants? What do you tell him to do?
I would think the first thing that he could do, and that should happen as part of a blanket energy emergency from his very first day, is reopen every single plant that was shuttered in the Biden administration. They closed over 100 coal power plants in the name of climate change, turned them all back on, have an increase in electricity. We need it, and that you'll immediately see utility prices lower. We're paying 30% more for electricity than we were in 2020. That's a quick solution that the American people will feel, get them all back online.
Always amazing information from Daniel Turner, founder and executive director of Power of the Future. Go to powerofthefuture.com. Daniel, great stuff. We're going to have a lot of energy to talk about in the coming months. Let's do this again very soon if we can.
Anytime, Joe. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, brother. We're back after this. Stay right here.